This presentation is called Fundamentals of Business Process Management. In this presentation, we will cover Chapter 5, Process Discovery. The first section is the setting of process discovery. The second section is process discovery methods. And the third section we will cover is process modeling method. The last section is process modeling quality assurance. Introduction. In the previous two chapters, we learned how to create process models. However, in practice, process models are often created from a textual description of the process, and multiple stakeholders with different and complementary skills are typically involved in the construction of a process model. In this chapter, we present the challenges faced by stakeholders involved in the lead up to constructing a process model and discuss methods to facilitate effective communication and information gathering. The purpose of process discovery. The primary purpose of process discovery is to understand the actual processes. The biggest problem with processes is that although businesses have full knowledge about their desired processes, they have no idea about what their actual processes look like. Section 5.1, the setting of process discovery. Process discovery is defined as the act of gathering information about an existing process and organizing it in terms of an as-is process model. Modeling can only start when enough information is gathered. Phases of process discovery. The first phase is defining the setting. This translates to assembling a team in a company responsible for working on a process. The second part is gathering information, which means building an understanding of the process. The third part is conducting the modeling tasks. This translates to organizing the creation of the process model in a systematic way. And the last part is assuring process model quality. This means guaranteeing that the process models meet different quality criteria to establish trust in the model. Roles in the process discovery that are very important is the process analyst and the domain expert. Each of these individuals are expected to have a different set of skills. The process analyst is responsible for driving the modeling of an analysis of a business process. But the process analyst is not familiar with all the details of the business process. The process analyst is responsible for securing the commitment of various domain experts for providing information on the process. On the other hand, the domain expert is any individual who has intimate knowledge about how a process or activity is performed. Multiple domain experts can be involved, with each having a different perspective on the process. All the domain experts should jointly have insight into the whole process. Now, the challenges of process discovery included fragmented process knowledge, thinking in cases, lack of familiarity with process modeling languages. Fragmented process knowledge means that the information is dispersed among different individuals so that the domain experts and the process analysts are not necessarily on the same page. Fragmented process information is one of the reasons why process discovery requires multiple iterations. Thinking in cases. Domain experts are usually adept at describing process activity, but are not reliable sources for answering general questions. So therefore, the business decisions must be rerouted due to a lack of communication between the process analyst and the domain expert. Lack of familiarity with process modeling languages. Domain experts suffer from a lack of training in creating and interpreting process models. Domain experts also lack experience with process modeling languages such as the business process modeling and notation. Process, Therefore, process analysts must translate process requirements in plain English. The profile of a process animal is basically um, determined by a five-factor model that looks for certain personal dispositions, such as openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Process discovery methods. Discovery methods are techniques for gathering information, and they come in three types: evidence based discovery, interview based discovery, and workshop based discovery, with each discovery method including its own steps. Process modeling method. It comes in five steps. The first step is identify the process boundaries. The second step is identify the activities and events. The third step is identify resources and their handovers. The next step is identify the control floor. Uh, the last step is identify additional elements. The first step of the first instance of identifying the process boundary is essential for to understand the scope of the process that needs to be modeled. The next thing to do is to identify the events that trigger the process. Next, we have to identify events that identify possible outcomes. As in the case of the identify the activities and event, we look to identify the main activities of the process, which can lead to identifying activities that takes place within the process. And we end up with identifying intermediate events that take place within the process. Next, we identify resources and their handovers. We want to create pools and lanes and events and activities that fit into these pools and lanes. Then we want to define the handover points that we hand over to other participants. Next, we want to identify the control flow using gateways and decision points so as to create rework and repetitions using loop structures. Lastly, we want to identify additional elements that includes artifacts and exception handlers. Then we want to add data objects and data stores and their relations to the activities involved. The process model of quality assurance. We want to gather and organize process related information in a process map model, typically a sequential event activity, which involves at least one process analyst and multiple domain experts. We use syntactic quality and verification, which relates to the conformance of a process model to the syntactic rules of the modeling language used. Then we look at the semantic quality and verification, which deals with the adherence of a process model to its real world process. We use validation as the activity of checking the semantic quality of a model by comparing it with its real world business process. Next, we look at pragmatic quality and verification, which relates to the usability of a process model. In other words, if it's practical. Then we use certification as the activity of checking the pragmatic quality of a process model by investigating its use. We're looking at modeling guidelines and conventions as an important tool to make sure the models are consistent and to keep their integrity and multiple people are involved. In order to do this, we use the 7 process modeling guideline or 7PMG. First, we use as few elements in the models as possible. Less elements is easier to understand. Then we minimize the routing paths per element. Less passes paths, less chance to get errors. It makes sense. Use one start and one end event. Less events is easier to understand. We model as structured as possible. That means we adhere to a particular structure which is easier to understand and produces less errors. We avoid OR gateways. No OR gateways is equal to understand. We use verb object activity labels, which is less ambiguous and easier to understand. We want to decompose a model with more than 30 elements. Less elements is easier to understand as well. These are the credits that was used in this presentation. This is the end. Thank you.